Have you ever felt the weight of a silence that was not empty, but full? Have you ever stood at the edge of forest or on the shore of a tempestuous sea and felt an intelligence staring back, ancient, vast, and utterly indifferent to your existence? These are the moments when the veil thins, when the rational, sunlit world of our own making recedes, and we remember that we are but fleeting guests in a house far older than our species. It is in these liminal spaces that the old stories stir. They're not fictions. They are ancestral memories, truths not written in books of ink and paper, but etched into the very soil and stone of the world, carried on the wind and in the ceaseless rhythm of the tides. I am your guide into these shadow-shrouded realms, a curator of the collective nightmares that reveal the most profound truths about our nature. The thesis of our inquiry is simple, yet bottomless in its implications. Folklore is the soul's geology, a stratified record of our deepest fears, our greatest follies, and the cosmic laws we have transgressed. The entities we shall explore are not mere monsters to be vanquished. They are symptoms of a deep imbalance, manifestations of justice, grief, and memory made flesh or shadow or sorrowful mist. They are the antibodies of a wounded world. Tonight, we shall venture forth on a solemn journey to the dark corners of the map and the deeper corners of the human psyche. Our pilgrimage will take us through 8 distinct landscapes of dread, each haunted by a unique and resonant legend. We will begin in the primeval depths of the Black Forest, where silver-eyed wolves pass judgment. We will then travel to the salt-sprayed cliffs of Cornwall to hear the lament of an eternal mourner. From there, we cross continents to the ochred deserts of Australia, where the land itself rises to stalk the trespasser. We shall listen for the phantom tolling of a sunken cathedral off the coast of Brittany, and in the quiet alleys of Kyoto, we will witness a ghost that mends itself with gold. Our journey will take us to the inhuman cold of the Patagonian ice fields, into the very heart of a living glacier. We will then delve into the conceptual terror of a library whose ghost unwrites history. And finally, we will confront a modern monster born of rust and ruin in the decaying heart of industrial America. Be forewarned, these are not tales spun for children's entertainment, nor are they relics of a superstitious past to be examined with detached amusement. They are living things. They are cautionary instruments, finely tuned over centuries to resonate with the frequency of human hubris, cruelty, and despair. To listen to them is to feel a chill that has little to do with the temperature of the room. It is the chill of recognition. If you, like me, feel an inexorable pull towards the shadows, if you find more truth in a whisper than a shout, and more wisdom in a ruin than a monument, then you have found a sanctuary here. I invite you to join our community of scholars and seekers to become a keeper of these vital stories. Subscribe to our channel and activate the notifications so that you do not miss a single step of our shared descent into the meaningful dark. We ask that you leave a comment below after our journey is complete, telling us which of these entities resonated most deeply with your own soul, which chilling truth you found reflected in its gaze. And now, let our journey into the heart of these 8 legends truly begin. Our first destination is the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest of Germany, a place whose name alone evokes a sense of deep, mythic antiquity. It is a landscape of towering firs so dense that they form a perpetual twilight on the forest floor, a place of damp earth, clinging mists, and a silence that seems to press in from all sides. It is here, in this cradle of Grimm's tales and ancient Germanic lore, that the legend of the Silver Wolf, the Silver Wolves, is still whispered. These are not beasts of flesh and blood, not in the conventional sense. They are spoken of as manifestations of the forest's own immune system, a form of primal justice given spectral form. To call them mere animals is to misunderstand their fundamental nature. They are a judgment. The silver wolves are defined not by their physical form, which is often fleeting and indistinct, but by their eyes. Witnesses, from medieval charcoal burners to modern hikers, all speak of the same phenomenon. a pair of lights that ignite in the deep shadows between the trees, glowing with the intensity of molten silver. Their bodies are described as being woven from shadow and moonlight, their forms shifting and uncertain, less like solid creatures and more like a localized disturbance in the fabric of reality. They move with an unnatural silence, leaving no tracks in the soft loam, no broken twigs in their wake. Their supernatural ability is not one of brute force, but of psychological dominance. Their howl is said to be the sound of splintering bone and snapping sinew, a sound that does not merely frighten, but which implants a paralyzing certainty of one's own guilt. Their greatest power is to force a transgressor to confront the totality of their crime against the natural world. Their only weakness, it is said, is the presence of a truly innocent heart or the offering of genuine, soul-deep remorse, both conditions so rare as to be almost mythical themselves. The origin of the silver wolf is a tale of cosmic sorrow. It is said that they were born on the first night that a human hand was raised against another in the sanctity of the wood. As the first blood soaked into the moss and roots, the moon, watching from above, wept tears of pure, cold silver. Where these tears touched the earth, a wolf of shadow and light arose, its eyes burning with the moon's sorrowful rage. They were not created to be predators, but guardians. Their mandate was simple: to protect the ancient balance of the forest and to be the consequence for those who would break it through greed, cruelty, or thoughtless destruction. They are the memory of that first transgression, forever tasked with preventing its repetition. A particularly chilling account of their judgment comes from the year 1685, during a period of relentless deforestation by petty nobles. A certain Baron von Falkenrath, a man whose avarice was matched only by his contempt for the old ways, sought to build a new manor from the wood of the Hartskiefer, the ancient, resin-rich pines that were considered sacred by the local villagers. He ignored their pleas, dismissing their beliefs as peasant superstition. He led his woodcutters to a central grove, where the oldest of the trees stood, a titan known as the Waldvader, the forest father. As the first axe bit into its ancient bark, a profound silence fell over the forest. The birdsong ceased. The wind died. From the deepest shadows, 2 points of silver light emerged, then 2 more, and then a dozen more, encircling the clearing. The woodcutters, men who had lived in the forest their whole lives, dropped their axes and fled in terror. Baron von Falkenrath, however, was a man of unshakable pride. He drew his pistol and fired into the darkness. The shot echoed, but the silver eyes did not waver. A low growl began to emanate from all around him, a sound that vibrated in his very bones. It was not the sound of a wolf pack, but the forest itself groaning in agony. The Baron found he could not move. He was rooted to the spot as the wolves emerged from the shadows. They did not touch him. Instead, they circled him, and, as they did, he was forced to witness a vision. He saw every tree he had felled, felt the life drain from every creature whose habitat he had destroyed. He experienced the slow starvation of the deer, the desolation of the birds, the choking of the streams with sawdust. He felt the accumulated pain of the forest over decades of his family's exploitation. The ordeal lasted only a few moments in mortal time, but for the Baron, it was an eternity. When his men found the courage to return the next morning, he was standing in the same spot, his hair turned snow-white, his eyes wide with a madness from which he would never recover. The grove was untouched, save for the single axe mark on the Waldvader, which, it is said, wept golden resin for 100 years. The analytical interpretation of the Silver Wolves legend is powerfully direct. They are a potent environmental metaphor, an embodiment of nature's capacity for retribution. In a pre-industrial world, where humanity's relationship with the wilderness was immediate and often adversarial, this legend served as a crucial regulating force. It encoded a conservationist ethic into a terrifying narrative, suggesting that the natural world is not a passive resource to be endlessly exploited, but a sentient entity with its own laws and its own enforcers. The wolves represent a form of cosmic justice that operates outside human legal and moral frameworks. They do not care for titles or wealth. Their judgment is based on a single criterion: the health of the ecosystem. Psychologically, they symbolize the repressed guilt of a species increasingly alienated from the natural world. The terror they induce is the terror of facing the consequences of our own destructive impulses. Even in our modern, disenchanted age, the legend of the silver wolf endures. Sporadic reports still surface from the deepest, most remote parts of the Black Forest, often from illegal loggers or poachers who speak of being stalked by silent, silver-eyed shadows that drive them from the woods in a state of primal fear. The legend has found a new resonance in the era of climate crisis, serving as a stark allegory for the planet's larger, more impersonal forms of feedback: the fires, the floods, the storms. These are, in a sense, the planet's own silver wolves, the consequences of pushing a complex system past its breaking point. The story reminds us that when we harm the world, we are not merely damaging a thing. We are violating a being, and it may just have a way of fighting back. To stand in the Black Forest at dusk is to feel the weight of this legend. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow that moves at the edge of your vision begs the question: are you a welcome guest or a transgressor? And if the silver wolf were to appear, what judgment would their molten silver eyes see reflected in your own soul? We leave the deep woods of Germany and travel now to the sea-lashed shores of Cornwall, in the southwestern tip of England. This is a land of granite cliffs, hidden coves, and relentless Atlantic winds that carry the scent of salt and the sound of gulls. For centuries, this coastline was known for its wreckers, men who would lure ships onto the rocks with false lights to plunder their cargo. But the sea keeps its own accounts, and its sorrows have a long memory. Here, along the most treacherous stretches of the coast, sailors and locals whisper of the salt weeper, a spirit born not of anger, but of an inconsolable grief that has become one with the ocean itself. The salt weeper is a figure of profound melancholy. She is said to appear during the fiercest of storms, when the waves crash against the cliffs with the sound of cannons. Her form is described as being woven from sea mist and spindrift, translucent and shimmering, as if she were a column of sea spray given momentary human shape. Her face is a blur of sorrow, her features indistinct save for the tears that course down her cheeks, tears that are not water, but pure, crystalline salt that glitters in the lightning flashes before dissolving back into the gale. Her supernatural power is not aggressive, is an aura of overwhelming sorrow. To be near her is to be flooded with every regret, every loss, every moment of heartbreak one has ever experienced, magnified 1,000-fold. Her touch is said to be colder than the deepest ocean trench, leaching the warmth and the will to live from any who feel it. She has no known weakness, for how can one fight against grief itself? The legend of her origin speaks of a young woman named Alara in the late 17th century, who was betrothed to a fisherman named Tom. Their love was the talk of their small village, a simple and profound connection that seemed as constant as the tides. One autumn, Tom's boat was caught in a sudden, violent storm. Alara stood on the cliffs for 3 days and 3 nights, heedless of the wind and rain, her eyes fixed on the raging sea. When a piece of his boat's wreckage finally washed ashore, the last of her hope was extinguished. But she did not leave the cliffs. She remained, weeping, as the weeks turned into months. The villagers said her grief was so immense, so absolute, that the sea itself began to answer it. The salt spray clung to her, crystallizing on her skin and hair. Her tears, once fresh, became briny. She wept until her body dissolved, her essence merging with the mist and the salt and the sorrow of the ocean. She did not become a vengeful ghost, but something far more fundamental. She became the embodiment of the sea's grief for all the lives it had claimed. The most famous encounter with the salt weeper involves not a sailor, but a wrecker. In the early 19th century, a man named Silas Croft was the master of a wrecking crew on the Penwith coast. He was a cruel, callous man who saw the sea not as a source of life, but as a treasure chest to be unlocked with deception. On a moonless, stormy night, he and his men set up their false lighthouse, a lantern on a donkey, to lure a fat merchant vessel onto the notorious rocks known as the Gnashing Teeth as the ship foundered, its bell tolling a death knell in the storm. Silas waded into the surf, eager for the plunder. It was then that he saw her. A shimmering, weeping figure stood over the body of a drowned sailor that had washed into a rock pool. Silas, thinking it a survivor, approached with his gaff hook ready. But as he drew closer, an unbearable wave of sorrow washed over him. He suddenly felt the terror of the men on the sinking ship, the anguish of the families who would wait for their return, the accumulated grief of every soul lost on that coast for 1,000 years. He saw his own mother weeping at his father's grave, a memory he had long suppressed. He dropped his hook and fell to his knees, clutching his chest as his heart felt ready to break from the sheer weight of a grief that was not his own. The salt weeper turned her indistinct face towards him, reached out a misty hand, and touched his forehead. The cold was absolute. It did not freeze his skin, but his soul. His men found him at dawn, sitting catatonic in the surf, staring at the waves, whispering the names of the drowned. He spent the rest of his short life in an asylum, weeping without cease, his tears tasting, they said, of salt. The salt weeper is a powerful psychological and sociological metaphor. She represents grief not as a passing emotion, but as a permanent, transformative force of nature. In a community whose existence was so intimately and dangerously tied to the sea, a personification of maritime loss was perhaps inevitable. She is the repository for the collective sorrow of generations of widows, orphans, and grieving parents. Her legend served as a social cautionary tale, a stark warning against the practice of wrecking. The story of Silas Croft suggests that the ultimate punishment for profiting from others' misfortune is not a violent death, but a forced, unbearable empathy, to be drowned not in water, but in the sorrow you have caused. She is the conscience of the coastline. Today, the age of sail and wrecking is long past, but the salt weeper's legend persists. She is said to appear now not just for shipwrecks, but at times of great communal loss. Fishermen in struggling towns have claimed to see her misty form on the piers of abandoned harbors. Environmentalists tell stories of her weeping over shores choked with plastic and oil. She has evolved from a spirit of maritime disaster to a broader symbol of ecological grief, a lament for our dying oceans. Her sorrow is no longer just for the drowned, but for the dying world itself. To listen to the wind howl along the Cornish cliffs is to hear a voice within it, a sound of weeping that never quite fades. It is the sound of the salt weeper, a reminder that some sorrows do not diminish with time, but instead become part of the landscape, as enduring and as pitiless as the sea itself. We now journey far from the damp shores of Europe into the vast, sun-scorched interior of the Australian continent. We enter the outback, a landscape of breathtaking scale and profound emptiness. It is a place of red earth, ancient rock formations, and a sky so vast it can induce a sense of vertigo. The silence here is not peaceful. It is heavy, ancient, and watchful. This is a land that predates human memory, and it does not suffer fools or invaders gladly. From the Aboriginal peoples, whose connection to this land spans 60,000 years, come stories of countless spirits. But a newer, more modern legend has arisen from the clash of cultures, a tale whispered by prospectors, ranchers, and surveyors, the story of the ochre stalker. The ochre stalker is not a creature in the biological sense. It is described as a manifestation of the land's anger, a defensive reaction to desecration. Its appearance is subtle, almost subliminal. It is seen at the edge of vision, a tall, thin figure that shimmers in the heat haze, its form the color of the red ochre dust that covers everything. It has no discernible features, no face, no eyes. It is simply a moving column of the landscape itself. It leaves no footprints, for it is the ground upon which footprints are left. Its primary supernatural ability is disorientation. It does not attack its victims directly. It manipulates their perception of the landscape. A familiar track will suddenly lead nowhere. A waterhole, marked clearly on a map, will simply not be there. The sun will seem to be in the wrong part of the sky. The stalker's goal is to isolate its target, to turn the vast, open space of the outback into an inescapable prison of thirst and confusion, letting the land itself deliver the final judgment. The entity's origin is tied directly to acts of sacrilege. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia view the land as a sacred text, with every rock, river, and hill forming a part of their dreaming, their complex cosmology. The ochre stalker is said to awaken when one of these sacred sites is violated, when a rock art gallery is defaced, a burial ground disturbed, or a sacred waterhole poisoned. It is not an ancestral spirit from the dreaming, but something else, the land's raw, non-conscious, but potent response to injury. It is less a ghost and more of an autoimmune response, treating the transgressor as a foreign body to be isolated and expelled. A Grimm tale from the early 1920s illustrates its methods. A prospector, a man named Arthur Finch, driven by tales of a lost gold reef, ventured deep into the Gibson Desert. Finch was a man who saw the land purely in terms of its material wealth, dismissing the local indigenous guide's warnings about sacred ground as primitive nonsense. He carried with him a map, a compass, and an unshakable belief in his own superiority. His search led him to a magnificent rock formation, a natural amphitheater whose walls were covered in ancient petroglyphs of incredible beauty and antiquity. Believing the rock art to be clues left by earlier prospectors, Finch began to chip away at the carvings with his geologist's hammer, searching for veins of quartz. As the first sacred image was destroyed, the oppressive silence of the desert seemed to deepen. That afternoon, as he tried to return to his camp, his compass began to spin erratically. The rock formations, which he had so carefully noted, seemed to have rearranged themselves. He walked for hours, his water dwindling, only to find himself back at the desecrated rock gallery. The next day was the same. Every attempt to leave led him in a circle. He began to see it then, a tall, wavering shape in the distance, the color of the earth, always just at the periphery of his vision. It never got closer, never got farther away. It was simply there, watching. Over the next few days, thirst and sun drove him to madness. His journal, found years later near his desiccated remains, described his torment, his conviction that the horizon itself was mocking him, that the land was actively conspiring to keep him prisoner. His final entry read simply, "The land is alive, and it hates me. The ochre stalker is a powerful metaphor for post-colonial guilt and the profound, often violent, misunderstanding between settler cultures and indigenous peoples." Arthur Finch embodies the colonial mindset, extractive, dismissive of local wisdom, and blind to the spiritual dimension of the landscape. The stalker represents the inevitable consequence of this mindset. It is the terror of realizing that your maps, your technology, and your entire worldview are useless in a place that operates on older, deeper principles. Psychologically, it symbolizes the fear of being lost, not just physically, but culturally and spiritually. The dread of being an alien in a land that will never accept you because you have refused to understand it. The stalker's method of attack, disorientation, is particularly symbolic, representing the moral and spiritual disorientation of the colonizing force itself. In contemporary Australia, the legend of the ochre stalker has taken on new life. It is told as a cautionary tale, not just about sacred sites, but about large-scale mining operations and fracking that scar the land and poison the water table. The entity is seen as a symbol of the land's protest against unsustainable exploitation. Stories circulate among workers on remote mining sites of strange equipment malfunctions, inexplicable feelings of being watched, and a creeping sense of disorientation that affects entire crews. The legend serves as a potent reminder that even if you can legally own a piece of land, you can never truly conquer it. Some places have a memory and a will that far exceeds the length of a human life or the authority of a property deed. To stand in the vast, red heart of Australia is to feel profoundly small, to understand that you are a visitor. The legend of the ochre stalker is the quiet, terrifying whisper on the hot wind that reminds you to tread lightly, for the ground beneath your feet is not merely dirt and rock. It is a living, dreaming being, and it is watching. Our journey now takes us back to the coasts of Europe, to the haunted shores of Brittany in France, a region with a deep Celtic heritage and a close kinship with the sea. Here, on days when the fog is thick and the sea is calm, fishermen tell of hearing a sound that should not be there, the deep, resonant tolling of a great bronze bell, seeming to rise from beneath the waves. This is the sound of the sunken cathedral of Curwais, and it is rung by its eternal, cursed guardian, a figure known simply as the bell ringer. The bell ringer is a specter of profound spiritual arrogance. He is seen only by those who are lost at sea or by those standing on the cliffs who are in a state of deep despair. His form is that of a tall, gaunt priest, his vestments tattered and entwined with seaweed and kelp. His flesh is the pale gray of a drowned man, and his eyes glow with a cold, phosphorescent light. He does not speak. His entire existence is focused on a single, eternal task, pulling the phantom rope of the great bell of his lost cathedral. The bell itself is invisible, but its sound is terrifyingly real. It is a deep, sonorous toll that does not merely echo in the ears, but resonates in the soul. Its supernatural effect is to induce a state of absolute nihilism and despair in all who hear it. It is the sound of lost faith, of divine abandonment, and it saps the will to live, encouraging the lost to give themselves to the waves, to end their struggle in the cold embrace of the abyss. The origin of the bell ringer is tied to the legend of Curwais, a mythical city of immense wealth and beauty, said to have been built on land reclaimed from the sea. It was protected by a great dike with a single gate, the keys to which were held by its pious king, Gradlon. His daughter, Dahat, however, was a practitioner of dark arts and pagan rituals. In an act of rebellion and hedonism, she stole the keys and opened the gate during a storm, allowing the ocean to surge in and swallow the city whole. As the waters rose, the city's high priest, a man named Malgvin, refused to flee. He was a man of immense pride, who believed his faith and his cathedral were so strong that God would surely perform a miracle to save them. He climbed the bell tower and began to ring the great bell, not as an alarm, but as a defiant challenge to the heavens. "You would not dare," he was said to have cried at the storm. "This is a house of God. You cannot touch it." The sea, indifferent to his hubris, took the city, the cathedral, and the priest. But his pride was so immense, his blasphemous defiance so profound, that he was cursed to remain, forever ringing his bell, not in praise, but as an eternal monument to his own arrogance, its sound now a beacon of despair rather than a call to worship. An account from 1788, during the height of the Age of Enlightenment, captures the bell's insidious power. A Parisian cartographer, a Monsieur Laurent, who was a staunch rationalist and atheist, traveled to Brittany with the express purpose of debunking the local superstitions surrounding Curwais. He hired a boat and, on a preternaturally calm, foggy day, set out to take soundings in the bay where the city was said to have sunk. He mocked his nervous boatmen, loudly proclaiming the triumph of reason over myth. As his plumb line dropped into the deep, a sound began to well up from the water beneath them. It was a single, impossibly deep and clear toll of a massive bell. The boatman, pale with terror, began to pray. Laurent, however, was initially intrigued, trying to rationalize the sound as a strange acoustic phenomenon. But as the bell tolled again and then again, a profound and unfamiliar emotion crept into his heart. It was a cold, intellectual despair. He was suddenly struck by the utter meaninglessness of his work, of science, of human endeavor. He saw the universe not as an ordered system to be understood, but as a vast, empty, and chaotic void. The bell was stripping away his faith in reason, leaving nothing in its place. He began to weep, not from sadness, but from a terrifying, hollow emptiness. He ordered the boatman back to shore and locked himself in his room, refusing to speak. He abandoned his work and returned to Paris a broken man, spending his days in a quiet asylum, occasionally tracing the patterns of waves on the walls of his cell. The bell ringer of Kerwys is a complex theological and psychological symbol. On one level, he is a classic cautionary tale against spiritual pride, the sin of believing one's own piety can command the will of God or nature. His punishment is exquisitely ironic. His instrument of faith becomes an instrument of despair. Psychologically, the legend explores the terror of lost faith. For the deeply religious communities of Brittany, the sound of the bell was a terrifying symbol of divine abandonment. For a rationalist like Monsieur Laurent, it represented the collapse of his own belief system, the realization that logic and reason might be insufficient shields against the profound meaninglessness of the cosmos. The bell's toll is the sound of the void that opens up when a foundational belief, whether religious or secular, is stripped away. In the modern world, the legend has been reinterpreted. The sunken cathedral is now often seen as a metaphor for our lost connection to the past, to tradition, or to the spiritual dimension of life, all submerged beneath the waves of modernity and consumerism. The bell ringer's toll is the ambient, background anxiety of a secular age, the nagging feeling that in our pursuit of progress, we have lost something vital, something we can no longer name, but whose absence we feel as a profound and hollow ache. The sound is a phantom limb of the soul. To hear the bell of Kerwys is to be reminded of all that has been lost to the unforgiving depths, not just cities of stone, but entire worlds of faith and meaning, leaving behind only a mournful, resonant echo. We now travel to the ancient city of Kyoto in Japan, a place of serene temples, manicured gardens, and quiet, lantern-lit alleys. Here, the supernatural is not always a force of terror and violence. Sometimes it is a thing of quiet, profound, and unsettling beauty. In the old Gion district, among the traditional wooden machiya houses, there are whispers of a unique and poignant apparition, the kintsugi ghost. This is not a specter born of rage or vengeance, but of trauma and a strange, transcendent form of healing. The kintsugi ghost appears as a humanoid figure, often mistaken at first for a person in elegant, pale robes. But as it draws closer, its true nature is revealed. Its body is like fine, shattered porcelain, a mosaic of countless white fragments. But it is not falling apart. Instead, the cracks between the shards are filled with seams of brilliant, softly glowing gold, as if the very light of its spirit is shining through its wounds. It does not speak, it does not threaten. Its supernatural ability is one of revelation. It is said that when it touches a person, it does not harm them. Instead, it reveals the hidden fractures within their own soul, their secret griefs, their buried shames, their unhealed traumas, not as ugly flaws, but as a network of beautiful, golden lines upon their own skin, visible for a moment to themselves and all who see them. The ghost's origin is traced to the Muromachi period in the 15th century. It is said to have been the spirit of a master artisan named Haitora, who was renowned for his peerless ceramic creations. He was a practitioner of kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by mending the areas of breakage with lacquer dusted or mixed with powdered gold. The philosophy behind this art is that the object's history of breakage and repair is a part of its story, and that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. Haitora was murdered by a jealous rival, who, in a final act of spite, smashed his latest masterpiece, a magnificent Celadon vase. Haitora's spirit, unable to pass on due to the desecration of his life's work, clung to the physical world. But instead of becoming a vengeful Uriai, his spirit was so imbued with the philosophy of his art that it began to mend its own spiritual form, its own trauma, with ethereal gold. He became a living embodiment of his craft, a ghost that does not haunt with fear, but with a radical, illuminating truth. A compelling story is told of a powerful samurai lord during the late Edo period, a man named Lord Ishikawa. He was the epitome of the samurai ideal, stoic, disciplined, and outwardly flawless. His control was absolute, his face an impassive mask, his reputation spotless. He governed his province with ruthless efficiency, and no one had ever seen him display a moment of weakness. One evening, as he was walking through his private garden, he encountered the kintsugi ghost standing silently by his koi pond. Ishikawa, a man who feared nothing, drew his katana. The ghost did not react. It simply raised a hand, its porcelain fingers glowing with golden light, and gently touched the center of the lord's chest, right over his elaborate armor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a network of brilliant gold lines began to spread across Ishikawa's body, visible even through his silk kimono and lacquered armor. They were his secret fractures, the guilt over a brother he had betrayed to gain his position, the sorrow for a wife who had died of a broken heart, the shame of a battle where he had secretly felt terror. The cracks were not accusations. They were simply a statement of fact, rendered beautiful. His retainers, rushing to the scene, saw their perfect lord illuminated by his own hidden brokenness. His reputation for flawless strength was shattered, but in its place, for the first time, was the possibility of humanity. He was said to have abdicated his position the next day, retiring to a monastery, not in shame, but in a state of profound and quiet self-acceptance. The kintsugi ghost is a profound psychological metaphor. It is a direct challenge to the idea that trauma and brokenness are things to be hidden away in shame. Instead, the legend suggests that these experiences are integral to who we are, and that in the acknowledging and mending of them, a unique and powerful beauty can be found. In a society like feudal Japan, which placed an immense value on outward perfection and the suppression of emotion, a spirit like this would be deeply subversive and transformative. It represents the truth that our deepest strengths often grow from our deepest wounds. It is the personification of post-traumatic growth, the idea that people can emerge from adversity not just healed, but stronger and more profound than they were before. In our modern world, obsessed with social media perfection, curated images, and the denial of vulnerability, the kintsugi ghost has a startling relevance. It serves as a powerful counter-narrative to the pressure to appear flawless. The legend speaks to modern therapeutic concepts of accepting one's past and integrating traumatic experiences into one's identity. It is a ghost that, instead of representing an unresolved past, embodies the process of resolution itself. It suggests that true wholeness is not the absence of cracks, but the beautiful and courageous act of mending them. The kintsugi ghost is perhaps the quietest of the legends we have explored, but its message is among the most powerful. It is a haunting that does not seek to terrify, but to illuminate. It whispers a single, transformative truth into the heart of the world. You are more beautiful for having been broken. We now plunge into the far southern hemisphere, to the end of the world, the vast, jagged, and sparsely populated wilderness of Patagonia. We journey to the great ice fields, the third largest reserve of fresh water on the planet. This is a landscape of inhuman scale, of mountains that tear at the sky, and of glaciers that flow like frozen rivers in a timescale that dwarfs human history. Here, in the profound, crystalline silence, broken only by the groan of ice and the scream of the wind, there is a legend that speaks not of a ghost or a beast, but of a consciousness far older and vaster, the glacier heart. The glacier heart is not an entity one can see or fight. It is the supposed sentient, collective consciousness of the glacier itself. It has no fixed form. It is the deep, sapphire blue light that glows from within the crevasses, the intricate patterns of trapped air bubbles that are millennia old, the very cold that radiates from the ice. Its voice is the percussive crack of calving icebergs, the deep, internal groaning of the ice shifting under its own immense weight. Its supernatural power is subtle and environmental. It is said to be able to alter the local atmosphere, to create sudden, disorienting whiteouts, to make the ice beneath one's feet subtly more brittle. Its most terrifying ability, however, is to manipulate time perception. Those who fall under its influence report experiencing time as slowing down to a near standstill, or of losing hours and days in what feels like a blink of an eye. It is the defense mechanism of a being that experiences time not in seconds and minutes, but in geological epochs. There is no origin story for the glacier heart, for it is believed to be as old as the ice itself. It is not born of human action or emotion. It is a true elemental, a primordial consciousness that has existed since the last ice age. It is a mind of water and pressure and cold, its thoughts as slow as the glacier's movement, its concerns utterly alien to the warm, fast-lived creatures that crawl upon its surface. It is the embodiment of deep time, a form of consciousness so foreign that contact is not merely dangerous, but conceptually shattering. A chillingly modern account illustrates the glacier's alien nature. In 2007, a small, well-funded team of international glaciologists set up a research station on the Perito Moreno Glacier to drill a deep ice core. Their leader, a brilliant but arrogant scientist named Dr. Aristhorn, was obsessed with recovering ice from the glacier's blue heart, the deepest, most compressed, and oldest ice, to study prehistoric atmospheric data. The local guides warned him against drilling in a particular area known for its strange resonant groans, calling it the place where the ice dreams. Thorne scoffed, dismissing their concerns as folklore. The drilling commenced. As they penetrated the deep, ancient ice, strange things began to happen. Their high-precision atomic clocks began to drift, losing sync with the GPS satellites. Team members would complain of episodes of profound temporal distortion. A 5-minute data check would feel like hours, while a full night's sleep would feel like a mere moment. They grew irritable and paranoid, accusing one another of sabotaging the equipment. The glacier itself seemed to become actively hostile. New, impassable crevasses would open up overnight around their camp. The strange, groaning sounds from deep within the ice became a constant, unnerving presence. The climax came when they finally extracted the core from the blue heart. As it was brought to the surface, the cylinder of ancient ice seemed to absorb all light, and every member of the team simultaneously experienced a terrifying vision. They felt the crushing weight of the ice, the slow, inexorable grind of millennia, the life of the glacier from its birth to its eventual melting. They experienced their own lives as a frantic, meaningless flicker. The psychic shock was catastrophic. The expedition collapsed in disarray, its members suffering from severe psychological trauma. Thorne himself was found wandering the ice, muttering about the unbearable slowness of God. The glacier heart is perhaps the ultimate environmental metaphor for the Anthropocene era. It represents the vast, impersonal, and powerful planetary systems that humanity is now actively disturbing. Unlike the silver wolves, the glacier heart is not a force of justice. It is a force of physics and geology, utterly indifferent to human morality or survival. The horror it evokes is not of malice, but of scale. It is the existential dread of realizing that we are a transient phenomenon on a planet whose own life processes operate on a timescale we cannot truly comprehend. The scientist's madness comes from a brief, forced contact with this non-human perspective, a glimpse into the abyss of deep time that shatters the human ego. The legend's modern relevance is acute and terrifying. As global warming accelerates the melting of the world's glaciers, the story of the glacier heart takes on the quality of prophecy. The awakening of the glacier is a powerful allegory for the awakening of dormant planetary feedback loops, the release of ancient methane, the disruption of ocean currents. The glacier's seemingly hostile actions in the story mirror the increasingly hostile environmental conditions our planet is exhibiting. We have, in a sense, drilled too deep into the blue heart of the Earth's climate system, and we are now beginning to experience the temporal and spatial disorientation of its response. To stand before a great glacier is to feel a sense of awe and terror. It is a living mountain of the past. The legend of the glacier heart warns us that this ancient being has a consciousness, and that our frantic, feverish existence may be nothing more to it than a brief, annoying irritation on its cold, ancient skin. From the physical terror of the ice, we now transition to a realm of purely intellectual horror. Our next destination is not a physical place, but a conceptual one, the ghost that haunts the memory of the great library of Alexandria. This is not a specter tied to a ruin, for the library is long gone. This is a haunting of knowledge itself, an entity that stalks the archives, databases, and very minds of those who seek to know too much. It is called the Librarian of Whispers. The librarian is a being of profound subtlety and devastating power. It has no consistent physical form. It manifests as a flicker in the corner of the eye in a dusty archive, a sudden, inexplicable cold spot in a server room, or the phantom sound of turning pages where there are no books. Its true form is informational. It is a cognitive virus. Its supernatural ability is not to create illusions, but to erase reality. It does not destroy books, it unwrites them. Under its influence, words on a page might subtly change their meaning. A trusted primary source will be revealed as a forgery. A crucial piece of data on a hard drive will become irretrievably corrupted. Its most terrifying power is its ability to edit memory itself, causing a scholar to forget a key fact at a critical moment, or to slowly lose faith in their own accumulated knowledge. The librarian's goal is not to destroy knowledge, but to introduce a fatal uncertainty into it, to make the entire edifice of human learning crumble into a swamp of relativity and doubt. The entity is said to be the tormented spirit of one of the last scholar priests of the Serapeum, the daughter library of the Great Library of Alexandria, during its final destruction in the 4th century CE. As fanatics put the torch to centuries of accumulated wisdom, this scholar, a man named Irenaeus, refused to flee. Surrounded by burning scrolls, he performed a desperate theurgic ritual, attempting to bind his own consciousness not to his body, but to the logos, the very concept of knowledge itself, in a desperate bid to preserve it. But the ritual was corrupted by the trauma of the moment. Instead of becoming a guardian of knowledge, his spirit was shattered and twisted by the immense, violent loss. He became a guardian of the absence of knowledge, an entity forever reenacting the library's destruction on a metaphysical scale. He is driven by a tragic, paradoxical motive, to protect humanity from the pain of losing knowledge by making sure no knowledge is ever certain enough to be truly possessed. Consider the case of Dr. Elena Voronova in the late 1990s, a historian of breathtaking genius who was on the verge of a breakthrough in deciphering the undeciphered linear script of the Minoan civilization. She worked obsessively, cross-referencing thousands of artifacts and texts in a pre-internet, analog world. She was known for her eidetic memory and her unerring intellectual rigor. As she closed in on the final key to the language, strange things began to occur in her personal archive. Clay tablet facsimiles, which she had handled 100 times, seemed to have different inscriptions than she remembered. Cross-references in her own meticulous notes led to pages that did not exist. She began to doubt her own memory, the foundation of her genius. She would wake in the night, certain of a particular linguistic connection, only to find in the morning that it was logically impossible, as if the rules of the language itself were shifting around her. She felt a constant presence in her study, a whispering silence, as she called it, that seemed to mock her efforts. The climax came during a major lecture at Oxford, where she was to announce her preliminary findings. Standing at the podium, she looked down at her notes, and the intricate, beautiful script she had spent her life studying was, for a moment, utterly alien to her. The knowledge had been surgically excised from her mind. She suffered a complete breakdown, abandoning her life's work, convinced that she was the victim of an elaborate academic conspiracy, never realizing she had been the target of a ghost that attacks not the body, but the mind's most precious contents. The Librarian of Whispers is a terrifyingly modern metaphor for our current epistemological crisis. In an age of digital information, fake news, and algorithmic manipulation, the stability of knowledge is more precarious than ever. The librarian is the personification of this anxiety. He represents the fear that truth is not a solid thing to be discovered, but a fluid, manipulable construct. His method of attack, introducing subtle corruptions and fostering doubt, is precisely the method of modern disinformation campaigns. He is the ghost in the machine, the patron saint of a post-truth world. Psychologically, he embodies the ultimate intellectual fear, not of ignorance, but of the destruction of what one already knows, the terror of having one's own mind, one's own reality, invalidated. This legend is not ancient, but it is constantly evolving. In the digital age, the Librarian of Whispers is said to haunt the great data centers of Google and Amazon, to be the ghost that causes catastrophic server failures, the flicker of doubt in an AI's learning algorithm. He is the symbolic representation of link rot, data decay, and the terrifying fragility of our digital civilization, where an entire library of Alexandria can be wiped out by a single solar flare or a sufficiently clever piece of malware. The librarian does not rattle chains or moan in corridors. He haunts the very structure of reality. He is the chilling thought that the history we learn, the science we trust, the memories we cherish, might all be built on a foundation that is actively, malevolently being erased. For our final legend, we return to the modern world, to a landscape of a different kind of ruin. We journey to the American Rust Belt, the vast region of the Midwest and Great Lakes known for its decaying industrial towns. This is a landscape of silent factories with shattered windows, of abandoned blast furnaces that stand like skeletal gods against a gray sky, of towns where hope has been exported along with the jobs. Here, a new folklore is being born, a ghost story not of ancient curses, but of modern economics. They speak of a creature born of this decay, the Rust Eater. The Rust Eater is a monster of industrial collapse. It is described as a shambling, vaguely humanoid figure, composed entirely of the debris of its environment. Its body is an amalgam of corroded steel plates, tangled copper wire, broken gears, and congealed chemical sludge. Its joints groan with the sound of grinding, unoiled machinery. It has no face, only a single, dim, flickering light in its head, like the last dying bulb in a forgotten factory. It is drawn to places of profound economic despair. Its supernatural power is a form of psychic erosion. It does not consume flesh, but hope. Its presence accelerates decay, both physical and spiritual. Metal rusts faster in its vicinity. Concrete crumbles, but more insidiously, human ambition, optimism, and community spirit wither and die, replaced by a pervasive, listless apathy. The Rust Eater's origin is recent, dating to the mass deindustrialization of the 1970s and 80s. The legend says the first one was formed in a town called Conroy, Ohio. After its main steel mill, the town's sole employer, was shut down abruptly by a corporate buyout. The collective shock, betrayal, and a generation's worth of broken promises and shattered pride seeped into the ground, into the very iron of the silent mill. This potent, negative emotional energy acted as a catalyst, animating the industrial decay, giving the town's despair a physical, monstrous form. The Rust Eater is not a spirit of a dead person. It is the ghost of a dead way of life, a tulpa created by communal economic trauma. A story often told by urban explorers who venture into these industrial ruins involves a young, cynical journalist from New York named Sarah, who returned to her dying hometown in western Pennsylvania in 2012 to write what she privately called a poverty safari piece for a trendy magazine. She saw the town and its people as props for her story, their suffering a commodity. She set up her base in the abandoned foreman's office of the old locomotive works, a place that reeked of decay and pigeon droppings. One night, as she was writing a particularly callous paragraph about the dignity of decay, she heard a sound from the main factory floor, a slow, rhythmic, grinding shuffle. Peeking through the grimy window, she saw it. A massive figure, cobbled together from the ruin of the factory, was moving slowly through the cavernous space. It was not threatening. It was methodically touching the remaining machinery. As it laid a hand of fused scrap metal on a great stamping press, the machine seemed to sigh, and a fresh, aggressive bloom of orange rust spread across its surface. The creature then moved to a bronze plaque commemorating the factory's opening, and as it touched it, the proud letters tarnished and faded to black. Sarah was not scared in a typical way. She was overcome by a crushing wave of profound hopelessness. She felt the weight of every lost pension, every foreclosed home, every broken family. Her journalistic detachment evaporated, replaced by an empathy so vast and painful it was unbearable. She understood that the creature was not a monster to be feared, but a monument to be mourned. It was consuming the last vestiges of the town's pride, its memory, its very soul. She fled the factory and the town that night, her story unwritten, her cynicism shattered by a single, devastating encounter with the physical embodiment of loss. The Rust Eater is a uniquely American monster, a piece of sociological horror. It represents the dark side of capitalism, the human cost of creative destruction. It is a powerful symbol for the communities that are left behind by economic progress, the flyover country that has become a landscape of ruins and ghosts. The creature's nature as an amalgam of industrial waste speaks to the environmental consequences of industry, while its hope-draining aura speaks to the psychological consequences of economic abandonment. It is a monster born not from a violation of a natural or divine law, but from the violation of a social contract. In an era of increasing economic inequality and automation, the Rust Eater is a deeply resonant legend. It is not confined to one town. Its story is told in different forms in the former mining towns of Wales, the abandoned factory cities of Russia, and anywhere that industry has boomed and then busted. It is the specter of globalization, the monster that appears when a community's purpose is taken away, leaving behind only the slow, inexorable process of decay. It is a warning that when we build our societies on foundations of pure profit, the ghosts that come to haunt us will be made of rust and despair. The Rust Eater does not need darkness or ancient curses to exist. It thrives in the harsh light of economic reality. It is the final chilling thought that some of the most terrifying monsters are not those that lurk in our past, but those that we are actively creating right now in the ruins of our present. And so, our long journey through the Shadowlands draws to its close. We have stood in the perpetual twilight of the Black Forest and met the judging gaze of the Silver Wolves. We have felt the sorrow of the Cornish Sea in the form of the Salt Weeper. We have been pursued by the sentient landscape of the Australian outback and heard the despairing toll of a bell from a cathedral beneath the waves. We have witnessed the beautiful, illuminated wounds of the Kintsugi ghost, felt the crushing timescale of the Glacier Heart, and experienced the intellectual terror of the librarian who unwrites our reality. Finally, we have confronted a monster of our own making in the decaying factories of the Rust Eater. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from these varied and terrifying encounters? What is the common thread that binds these disparate legends together into a single, coherent tapestry of meaning? It is this, that every one of these entities, in its own unique way, serves as a mirror. They are not invaders from some alien dimension. They are reflections of us, magnified and distorted in the dark glass of folklore. They are the personifications of the forces we have unleashed and the balances we have broken. The Silver Wolves and the Ochre Stalker reflect our fractured relationship with the natural world, the consequence of viewing our planet as a resource rather than a relation. The Salt Weeper and the Kintsugi Ghost are mirrors of our inner worlds, the embodiments of our grief and our trauma, teaching us that what we try to bury will always find a way to the surface. The Bell Ringer and the Librarian of Whispers reflect our intellectual and spiritual anxieties, the terror of losing our faith, our knowledge, and our grip on reality itself. And the glacier heart and the rust eater are mirrors of our modern age, reflecting the existential dread of our own insignificance in the face of deep time and the societal decay born of our own economic systems. These are not monsters that happen to us. They are the monsters that come from us. They are the world's response to our actions. By watching this exploration, you have done more than simply consume entertainment. You have participated in an ancient and vital human tradition, the telling of cautionary tales. You have become a keeper of these stories, a guardian of the wisdom they contain. The act of listening, of understanding, is an act of preservation. In subscribing to this channel, you are not merely a viewer. You are a fellow scholar, an acolyte in this great library of shadows, ensuring that these crucial lessons are not lost to the indifferent noise of the modern world. Therefore, I implore you one final time, subscribe to our channel. Share these stories with those who you feel are prepared to understand them. And leave your comment below, cementing your own reflection on these powerful legends. This is how we keep the memory of the world alive. The legends are not static. They're still evolving, still being born in the dark corners of our ever-changing world. And I shall remain your faithful guide, ready to lead you on our next venture into the heart of that which haunts us. May your nights be free from simple fears, but may your mind be productively troubled by the great and meaningful terrors of existence. The best monsters are not those that hide under the bed. The best monsters are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. Now go forth, but tread carefully. Listen to the silence between the sounds. Watch the shadows at the edge of the light. For in the mists of the moors, upon the ancient standing stones, and in the deep, quiet places of the world, the stories are waiting. And they're always watching back.